Hello again, and welcome to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the whole multiverse for fans of everything Spain. As usual, I'm your host, Daniel Welsh. I'm here in Barcelona, in the beautiful Dreta de l'Eixample neighborhood, and today I wanted to talk about a little bit of Spanish vocabulary. Specifically, Spanish words that don't exist in English or that have difficult translations or awkward translations into English. So, this is just going to be a language podcast, but don't worry, you don't need to know a lot of Spanish to make this work. The idea is that these are words you will hear one way or another. If you live in Spain, a lot of them you will, and it's good to know what they are, but you don't need to take this as any sort of grammar lesson. So, without further ado, maybe you could head by expatmadrid.com/12. I'll make a nice little link because we are episode 12 here, and I will just make a link to the blog post in case you want to see how any of these words are written. There's also a video form of a few of these. So just head past expatmadrid.com/12 and we'll see you over there. So let's talk about vocabulary. Back in the day, I used to teach English, and occasionally someone would tell me in class, "Daniel, your language is so limited. How do you even communicate? You don't have words for anything." Usually, what this meant was that the person in question had never opened a book in English and had never had an intelligent conversation with a native speaker. So they had really never come into contact with anything beyond an intermediate level vocabulary. I heard this a lot, and I would always resist the urge to slap someone upside the head with all 20 volumes of the unabridged Oxford English Dictionary. I would politely explain instead that actually we have a lot of vocabulary in English, and maybe we could take some time in class to learn some. We have synonyms for everything. We have dozens of words that are synonyms of walk or look. And according to whoever comes up with these things, English actually has the most words of any language. I don't know if that's still accurate, but I read it, several years ago, and some people say that. However, occasionally somebody would come up with something in Spanish that doesn't really translate very well to English. "Teacher, how do you say soy muy friolera in English?" Well, friolera, we don't really have a word for it. It means that you're always feeling cold, that you're sensitive to cold or something like that. But in Spanish, you can say soy muy friolero or friolera, and it means that. You're always cold. You could also say soy muy goloso or golosa, depending on your gender identification. Soy muy goloso is that I have a sweet tooth. I enjoy sweets. But once again, it's not a simple one-word translation. So those are a couple of examples, and here are a bunch more. Entrecejo. Entrecejo is the space between a person's eyebrows. After publishing a video where I mentioned this, my dad actually pointed out the word glabella. Apparently this word exists. I've never heard it, but glabella. It's the space between your eyebrows. You would never say, "Oh, look at that girl over there. She's got a really nice glabella." But that's what it is. In Spanish, entrecejo. This makes sense because las cejas are eyebrows and entre just means between. Interestingly, in English, we have this word frown, which I always think of being as something you do with your mouth. I think of as being something you do with your mouth. But in Spanish, frown is fruncir el entrecejo, which could literally be to knit one's brow. Knit one's brow sounds very literary, I know, but that's how they say it. Fruncir el entrecejo. There's another word that I like, which is cejijunto, which refers to people who have a unibrow, the two eyebrows that are kind of grown together with hairs in between. Cejijunto, which is from cejo again, and together, junto. Next we have estrenar. Estrenar could be a few different things, but in Spanish they use it a lot to talk about wearing something for the first time. You could say, voy a estrenar mis nuevas zapatillas. I'm going to wear my new trainers for the first time, my new tennis shoes for the first time. I might be so old that I'm now saying tennis shoes for shoes that you're, just using as athletic shoes that you're just walking around in. But yeah, estrenar unas zapatillas is to wear your shoes for the first time. You could do this with a lot of things. You could estrenar un abrigo. You're wearing a coat for the first time. If you move into a new house or you buy a new bed, you could invite your partner to estrenar la cama, which would mean that you're going to, have sex in the bed for the first time. You're going to use the bed for the first time. I wouldn't say estrenar la cama if you're just sleeping in it for the first time, but if you're, using it for more exciting things, vamos a estrenar la cama. So that is estrenar. You might see the word estreno. Estreno is the first time that a movie is released, basically, or something else. Estreno. So it's the release of a movie. It's the first time that something happens generally. Afterwards, we have sobremesa. Sobremesa, you need a long translation for this. It's a long conversation after lunch or dinner without getting up from the table. It's exactly what it sounds like. You have a big lunch, and afterwards, it's perfectly acceptable, or even sometimes required, that you sit around at the table for a while and chat with people. This could take a couple of hours after lunch even. A lot of times, in a restaurant, the waiters are not going to rush you out. They'll let you sit. They'll bring you some more wine. You can have some coffee, and you can just sit around and have a sobremesa. This kind of thing seems a bit unnecessary for people who are not used to the Spanish long lunches, but I have friends in Madrid where if I start lunch at 2, I'm back home at 8 p.m. or something, because we end up, having more wine. We have gin and tonic, and then another gin and tonic, and eventually, 6 hours later, we're done with lunch. But it's mostly the sobremesa. So that's an interesting word and cultural concept. Quincena is a period of 15 days. In apparently every English-speaking country except the United States, people use the word fortnight a lot. I never use the word fortnight. It sounds very old school and literary to me. I've never actually used it. In any case, I'm pretty certain that fortnight is 14 days, and quincena is technically 15. It comes from quince. So there's a bit of a difference there. It's possible, I have the strong feeling that when Spanish people say una quincena, what they mean is if we were to say about 2 weeks. It's not exactly 15 days necessarily. It could just be, an approximate number of days that is about 2 weeks. You would use it a lot if you're going to talk about, I have my holidays la segunda quincena de agosto, the second half of August, the second 2 weeks of August. It's approximate, maybe from the 15th to the 31st of August, which would be a couple more, that'd be 16 days, presumably. But the quincena, that's what it means. It's just about 2 weeks. There's another interesting time expression, a lustro, un lustro, which you sometimes see in a newspaper article. It means a period of 5 years. According to word reference, we actually have an English word, lustrum, but I've never heard it. I would assume that lustrum comes from Latin, and that's It just sounds like a very formal thing that since it's not the 19th century, nobody's saying it anymore. Tocayo is a person with the same name as you. My name is Daniel. If I meet someone named Daniel, or possibly even Daniela, this person might call me Tocayo instead of calling me Daniel. It just means that we have the same name. It's kind of a cute thing that people do. In English, we don't really do this. We would say, oh, my name is also Daniel. What a coincidence. But we wouldn't specifically call somebody anything like this. But in Spanish, Tocayo. In Spain, also, there's people who might celebrate their saint's day, their name day, depending on their saint. And if you have a common or important saint's name, like in Spain, Pilar or Almudena in Madrid, Patricio from San Patrick, Jose from San Jose, Saint Joseph, the father of Jesus, etc. Somebody will probably mention this to you. Pilar is October 12th. She's the patron saint of Spain. So if you are named Pilar, somebody might let you know during the day, like, oh, felicidades, Pilar. Of course, you might not have a Spanish-sounding name at all. You might not have a Christian-sounding name at all. In which case, people will not call you Tocayo, most likely. But, of course, things are changing. In the past, here in Spain, there were a lot of these compound names and very traditional-sounding names. Things are getting more modern, and you will be hearing more exotic names as we move forward. Less Maria Jesus, less Jose Antonio, and more, modern stuff that people get from TV shows. Let's talk about botellón. Botellón is literally, it would just be a big bottle, but it's not a big bottle. It's a gathering of people drinking in the street, sort of a street party. It's mostly illegal. It depends on the town, I guess, but it's mostly illegal in a lot of places. People do it anyway, but you could get fined. And yeah, botellón. It's usually young people. It's just kind of a fun thing where people get together in the street and hang out and, drink cheap booze out of large bottles. Sometimes these have thousands of people. Sometimes they last all night long, depending on where you are and how strictly the police have decided to enforce these things. Anyway, if you do it, have fun, but don't get fined. Puente, of course, is usually a bridge, but puente is also a long weekend. In the US, we usually just move our holidays to a Monday so that we don't have weird holidays in the middle of the week. But there's plenty of Spanish holidays that are attached to a specific day. And if, your holiday just happens to be, if the Constitution Day happens to be on Thursday, then you get Thursday as a holiday. Some people will take Friday and then the weekend and have a 4-day weekend because of the Thursday holiday for Constitution Day. This is called a puente. There are plenty of other times when this could happen. There's usually a Puente de la Paloma, which would be the 15th of August. This is maybe not a holiday in every Spanish city, but in many it is. We would call it midsummer in some places, actually. The 15th of August, Puente de la Paloma. Dia de la Paloma is the 15th of August. But if you happen to take a day or two around that to create yourself a long weekend, then you would have El Puente de la Paloma. You could also have El Puente del Pilar. Pilar, as I mentioned, October 12th, the National Day of Spain, the patron saint of Spain, and a lot of people might take a couple of days off around that. El Puente del Pilar. So that's a puente, just kind of a long weekend with the cultural aspect that this could be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or it could be whatever it is. Madrugar is to get up early, which of course is not a particularly strange thing, but it is a one-word translation for something that we need more words to talk about in English. Madrugar. So you could say, mañana tengo que madrugar. Tomorrow I have to get up early. I can't go out. I have to madrugar. In Spanish also, they have an expression, a proverb, which is a lot like the early bird gets the worm. The early bird gets the worm, of course, is a metaphor because you are not a bird and you probably don't eat worms. In Spanish, what they say is, a quien madruga, Dios le ayuda. A quien madruga, Dios le ayuda. He who gets up early is helped by God. God helps he who gets up early. Or she who gets up early, if you prefer. There's another expression, no por mucho madrugar amanece más temprano. That means you can't really hurry things, basically. It's not actually talking about getting up early, but it means that some things take time, and stressing about it will not make them happen faster. No por mucho madrugar amanece más temprano. Getting up early will not make the sun rise any sooner, would be a literal translation. Next we have anteayer. I agree that anteayer is an easy concept in English. It is the day before yesterday, but some people will tell you that that's not very elegant at all. Why do we need 4 words to talk about the day before yesterday when we could say anteayer? Of course, in Spanish, we also have mañana por la mañana, which is 4 words to express tomorrow morning. We have pasado mañana, which is the day after tomorrow. So not always a shorter and easier translations for things like this. But anteayer, the day before yesterday. The last one we're going to talk about today is tutear. I like tutear a lot. This refers to using the tu form of verbs to address somebody, the informal verb form to address somebody. Tu instead of usted. Usted is more formal. Here in Spain, at least in the big cities, it's not super common. I don't use usted very much at all, unless I'm talking to a very elderly neighbor or something. I just don't. Even, a boss or a landlord or something like that. I would probably just use tu unless there's a huge age difference or something. Maybe I can think if I were on trial for some crime, I would probably use usted for the judge and, in any sort of very, very formal situation. But I have, I have a expensive immigration lawyer and we use tu when we talk to each other. So it's not a big deal here in metropolitan Spain, let's say. In other Spanish-speaking countries, it's much more common to use usted. Anyway, tutear is the verb for using tu instead of usted. It's pretty hard to translate even this concept, but older novels, like, novels from the 19th century or whatever, talk about this more because they have more social hierarchy and things. And occasionally there will be a moment in the novel where the characters, become more friendly and they start to tutearse. And, the translator, if you're translating this to English, sometimes the translator will just put a footnote in here to explain what happened because the translation is impossible. In English, we might just call somebody, Mr. Clinton or Mr. Biden or whatever. And this person might say, please, call me Bill. That would be about the equivalent. Calling somebody by, their last name versus their first name. But also in my English-speaking life, not a lot of people are calling me Mr. Welsh. Sounds a bit old school and perhaps excessively formal in most situations these days. So are there more impossible translations? Well, yes, there certainly are. There's a whole lot of things in English also that are very hard to translate into Spanish. I have an article on my English teaching blog where I talk about the difference between look, see, watch, gaze, stare, ogle, peep, peer, and things like that. Just different synonyms for look and different ways of looking at someone. In Spanish, it can be really complicated to say these things. You need a long expression to say stare. Well, stare is 2 words. It's mirar fijamente. But if you wanted to say something like gawk or ogle or something like that, you need even more. So that's a different issue. The ample vocabulary that we have in English, the ample vocabulary in Spanish, but not all of the concepts are super easy to translate. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Spain to Go. Please subscribe wherever it is that you subscribe to podcasts. Spotify now has a system where you can give me a ranking from 1 star to 5 stars. I, of course, would recommend that you give me 5 stars because I hope you enjoy this podcast that much. So please leave me some stars on Spotify. And Apple Podcasts also will let you leave some stars and a review. So give that a try. I would also love to hear from you. Head by expatmadrid.com and there's a contact form. You can write me a message there. Otherwise, I'm very easy to find on the internet. But the easiest, expatmadrid.com/contact, I believe is where it is. And you can send me a message. Let me know what you want to hear about. I'm happy to do some research and hopefully whip something up about a variety of topics here on Spain to Go. So until next time, I hope you have a great day out there. Keep it real, and we'll talk soon. Bye.